the judge's comments. This is a humorous poem that does just the trick. It tickles the funny bone with clever comparisons between the British and Australian birds. Maybe that's why they asked me to read it, with a British accent. And perhaps an underlying commentary about their citizens too. The language devices are well used and don't come across forced as a result. Now, Elizabeth, I love you and I hate you. Do you realise what I have to read out?
Sorry.
I think you should be sorry.
Yes.
And will you help me out if I get it wrong? Please?
I'm not entirely sure that I'd be able to.
So bear with me, please. I hate you. The not-so-standard Book of Birds. In all the books that I have read with onomatopoeia, the British birds seem to be bred to sing Ave Maria. But unlike all those avians who chirp and tweet and flutter, my birds speak Australian words like, yeah, get off, you bugger! While doves bring peace and cooing song to grace our wedding feasts, the sulphur-crested cockatoos are different sorts of beasts. They'll strip the palings from your fence and given half a chance, they're best enjoyed a mile away whilst they meow and dance. And whilst some English birds can't claim to sing a lilting air, their plumage is at least designed with elegance and flair. The emu, on the other hand, whilst grunting,
I'm not doing this one.
the emu, on the other hand, whilst grunting, is only graceful when it puts its foot through half your lung. Poor Poe was plagued by nevermore. I wish, though, that were I, for I am plagued on every beach with grack from wings on high. Delinquent seagulls roaming gangs for undercover missions. They'll raid your chips and spoil your lunch with nasty dispositions. In wartime, gallant pigeons flew to spy for Allied troops. Their Dickon Valor medals were displayed in British coops. Our pigeons mumble constantly while lurching down the street. They'd never win a Dickon on their clumsy fumble feet. And although they sit in old gum trees, a kookaburra's humour is vindictive, not a merry laugh, despite the common rumour. The ibis raids our rubbish bins, the magpies steal our loot, the cassowaries angulars will strip your trees of fruit. These birds have not been idolised by Wordsworth, Keats or Shelley, but then we are a nation that has idolised Ned Kelly. Our birds seem to be useless, abrasive and uncouth. In fact, they fit the stereotype of our Australian youth. But if you think our birds are strange, then take a look around. For far worse are our animals who lurch across the ground.
Was the winner of this category last year and prepared to travel a long distance again to be with us. So we're really delighted that you could be here, and I think your mother Jerry is here also tonight. So welcome, it's good to have you with us again. I'm going to ask Joe Shearer to now read Jacqueline's poem, Stamps. Thank you.
The judge's comments about this submission are: this was a wonderful open-form object poem that reveals much more than it seems. It does this by imagery linking the stamp collection to the atrocities of World War II. This then positions us to consider our own secrets and behaviour. The poet has displayed a sophisticated use of natural language and rhythm. Stamps. I did not even realise my family had them. An album packed away under the house. only uncovered in the tumult of moving. Faded, but well cared for. Nazi state printed in typewriter letters on the cover. Inside, the colours are light, adjusted obediently in rows and columns and covered with waxy paper. Yet, in the half-life, they line up in military formations. The Führer's face and swastika on every page. Deutsches Reich is announced in curling letters and a yellow perforated trim. In a darkened room under the lamp, I can touch the paper that saw unimaginable things. The book on my desk haunts me, and I wonder what else about ourselves we do not know.
Thank you. Trevor Johnson and I have been judging the bush poetry for some years now, and the standard this year was certainly the highest that we have encountered. It's a great credit to the Ipswich Poetry Feast and the organisers to draw such great Australian poets to this competition. Our judges' comments on Grandad's Purple Donkey. The writer demonstrates an excellent understanding of the genre of bush poetry. With consistent metre and accurate rhyme, the poet introduces a theme and develops it to a dramatic conclusion. The reader's interest is heightened by not only the significance of the purple donkey, but the masterful way the poet has introduced three different aged characters whose dialogue moves from description to suspense to violence. The veneer of civility is stripped away, and the stark reality of what the Grandad had experienced is revealed. This is achieved by insightful imagery that is both relevant and forceful. This poem has the potential to have a significant impact on its reader. Grandad's Purple Donkey. My granddad told me stories back when I was just a girl of fun and far-off places, and my mind would be a whirl. Exciting stories fill my head. I'd sit upon the floor and beg him, "Tell the donkey stories, Grandad, just once more." To hide the gore of war from me, he'd make the stories fun, and happy ever after was the close of every one. He spoke of World War II, Fromelles, the Sinai, Palestine, showed medals, faded telegrams, old letters tied in twine. Young faces smiled in tattered photos, smooth-faced teenage men. But soon my thoughts would wander. Tell the donkey once again. A steamboat from 1,000 donkeys sailed to Anzac Cove, and into clear blue water all the laughing donkeys dove. But I was just a 5-year-old. I didn't see the truth or heartache in the stories of his wartime stolen youth. And mule teams too, they liked to play in mud pools, Ypres, France. When grumpy though all, long ears laid back, they'd freeze in stubborn stance. The shed was Grandad's refuge, like his peaceful, secret place. From time to time his words would slow. He'd stare off into space. They're God's own special creatures. See the cross upon their backs? They're mighty strong. They haul supplies and food in heavy packs. He jigsawed wood and sawdust flew. He sanded smooth each piece. Exertion seemed to soothe his soul, as though it brought release. The donkeys walked on silent hooves when men played hide and seek. Pull stick and canvas stretchers for the soldiers, hurt all week. As droplets spattered, Grandad sniffed. By Christ, it's hot in here. It wasn't sweat. Each splatter was a burning, grief-filled tear. The timber soaked up anger as he freed himself of pain by telling funny stories, how the donkeys kept him sane. Poor Bell slid down the mountain once. We had to winch her up. And Duffy, he liked whiskey. He would slurp it from me cup. And when their hungry tummies growled, they watched us as we ate. I let them have my hard tack and crumbs right off me plate. And then he'd droop. His hands would stop. Oh, their hearts were full of trust. I gladly shared me food with them. Can't live on rocks and dust. He glued and hammered softly, and I soon began to see he'd built a donkey rocking horse, especially for me. The dark-haired donkeys, they could hide beneath the veil of night, but grey ones glowed like nightlights if the stars were shining bright. And so, to make them darker and to keep them safe from view, we dyed the donkeys purple with a Condy's crystal brew. The camouflage of purple hid them well until they brayed. He laughed and shook a can of paint, a pretty purple shade. Each brushstroke went on lovingly, like Gramps was grooming coats of tiny, gentle donkeys on the shore, straight off the boats. Oh, those fearless purple angels pulled the Red Cross stretcher beds while fireworks whizzed and sparkled, making halos round their heads. When Gramps was sure the paint had dried, I touched it, cool and sleek, then placed 1,000 kisses on his smiling, stubbled cheek. I rocked upon that special toy my dear old granddad made and asked incessant questions. What is shrapnel? What grenade? He'd flinch. A mask would hide his face. Oh, those words are full of woe. Courageous mates like Blossom and Delilah helped me, though. I memorised each donkey's name, each story and each deed. New shaved tails, untrained donkeys that he had to train and feed. Hey, saddler, bring a plate and punch. His tummy shrank with thirst. Oh, those faithful donkeys. Grandad paused, and then his big heart burst. Oh, they swam through blood-filled water from the boats to get to shore, where bullets fell like hailstones in that thudding hell of war. Through cannon's boom and sniper fire, with shrapnel overhead, the ground was wet with blood where men and beasts lay sprawled out dead. Tales tumbled out I'd never heard. He'd kept them locked inside. I didn't want to hear them, so I snuck away and cried. I made a little stretcher and pretended nurse at war, with dolls as injured soldiers, crayon blood across the floor. When Grandad saw me acting out that gruesome wartime scene, he snatched my purple donkeys and he slammed the kitchen screen. I cringed to hear the anguish in his voice as Grandad fled. I filled the mind with poisoned thoughts. Oh God, just strike me dead. My grandma chased him, sobbing, but he pushed her hugs aside. I shot him in the heart. He snapped. His joy for life just died. The doctors gave him sedatives to keep him numb and calm. They put him in a hospital to keep him safe from harm. Come out and fight, you bastards. Come and face me man to man. Your name is on me bullet. Come and shoot me if you can. My grandma hugged me close and told me I was not to blame. But Gramps had been okay until he saw my stupid game. My rampant curiosity just would not let him be. I gouged and clawed my probing way inside his memory. Yes, I had brought those horrid visions back to haunt him so, the stench of death and holding gutted mates while cursing foe. He only lived a few more weeks before he passed away. The doctor said that Gramps gave up. His heart just stopped one day. His shed became my refuge, where I cried each day and hid. I swept the floor and tidied tools the way that Grandad did. One day, a glimpse of purple caught my eye, then gasps of joy. Wrapped carefully in blankets was my wooden donkey toy. Gramps' stories flooded back anew. I knew them word for word, as though it was just yesterday his rumbling voice I'd heard. A steamboat with 1,000 donkeys sailed to Anzac Cove, and into clear blue water all the laughing donkeys dove. Oh, how I'd love to kiss him now. Tears burned and welled, I sniffed. His heart and soul, his spirit, lived inside that special gift. If I could turn back time, I'd change that day that caused his end. My Gramps would still be living if I hadn't played pretend.
Thank you. I hope I do a good job of this, Brent. This is an amazingly uncompromising poem, and it tells the story of 16-year-old Andrew Bornan, who was struck by a car and killed after he was left handcuffed and lying face down in the street by police, Albion Street at Brassel. The bitumen where Andrew's life ended snakes its way through the poem, in many ways taking on a life of its own. The wildlife spectators on this tragedy add to the loneliness, looking down as the final unheard stroke of the chisel is made on Andrew's short life. Albion Street for Andrew Bornan. The bitumen was a blue scab, short-heeled and sticky, where its edges had been picked at by cars and trucks that gained bodily pleasure from teasing out its pain. Its crusted lip was infected and boiled as the Ipswich heat sank its knee into the road's soft navy groin. A bridge pulled like a stitch across the Bremer's tan cut, traffic laced over it and tied off the river's deep wound. A monument bled brass words on the wet crossing's historical news. A white pyramid, it stood as memory's speed hump, something to slow down. Light fled the scene without telling anyone as night injected itself into the squabble. A scheduled painkiller that cooled the hot sweat and turned the road to bruise. Rainbow lorikeets spewed out the animal's white noise. The bitumen gave a bit as he stepped onto it, like boys poking their fingers into a mother's set jelly and bending matter. The road had sunk into an abyss of cobalt and wobbled under his bare feet as he took centre stage. A breeze enveloped him in its fluid net and he looked towards the river, tracing the road's curvature until he spotted, just after the bridge, a giant's white tooth cemented into the ground. The Bremer, a soggy mouth sucked in all sound so he didn't hear the night's repeat command to lie down in its arms. Fruit bats formed a furry vortex as homogeneous dusk moved in and draped its black wing over him. They picked him up clearly as their radar signals bounced harmlessly from his head. Headlights spotted him and they gave him up for dead. With the switch of a torch, they transformed him into lead. His spotlit froze in the backyard at night where possums sucked him in with the pitch-black bath plugs of their eyes. These men were trees to him, pouches full of institution. He fell into the Sapphire Road's slick embrace as his body ripped its park brake and he jackknifed to a stop. His lips smeared some rouge on the bitumen's blue shirt. He swore they had filled his lungs with concrete. All he could get was a squelchy breath. His muscles ran their instant marathon. They tagged him with steel bracelets and supported a cause no one else could appreciate. Charity having fled back into Pandora's box to tape her sore wrists up. Time out of joint. Like water birds blind at night, they trailed a broken wing to distract the hunter who suddenly burst in on the thing. Nothing is as frightening as the telephone's midnight ring. Sound will take you if you stop and listen to it. Voices rise and fall like a sleeper's automatic chest or a kestrel's clawed collapse when breath quiet, a mouse never hears its death. The azure bitumen was oddly comfortable, like in the school playground when, big lunch perched, he would eat as if there were no tomorrow. It could be warm as any beach or stretched like old chewing gum, but here, right now, it only cradled him, a father's pumped arms, a mother's pliant breast. It stood in for the care of atoms and earthly stuff. He was touched at the last. He was a fallen statue carved from 16 years of love, that one small blemish kept from calling a masterpiece. He knew that a giant's tooth could chip as the road's indigo cloak engulfed him. He never listened to the chisel's final stroke. Beautiful, man. This poem is an absolute gem. The flood played a great character role through many of the poems that I read, but this is an incredible piece of writing, and the ending is really Kafkaesque, where the person who it's written for, Margaret Wheater, sheds off her earthly body. So I'll read you this poem, Heartland. She was caught between the nexus of the built and the unbuilt. At her stocking toes, the Bremer River spread its brown girth and sagged under the wooded slopes, its ripples folding like the cloth of some dark quilt. Some of it glided into the bank like a rudderless boat to lend a little help, but the steepness defeated it, so it sent out a shroud of liquid dust to wash her tired feet. Above her, the ironic steel smile of the pedestrian bridge splayed across the sky's blue face, as head-sized rivets chained its metal bulk to the concrete blockhouses on each bank. The arch of its iron back remained fixed in position. From it, she drew only the blankest of looks. Its strength never tested, an icon of the cement island, each body engineered to stay in its perfect situation. She had fallen into the eye of her own storm, or if Eden had a hidden crevasse, then snowblind she had tumbled down, foot betrayed to establish a bad connection with the knowledgeable world. Nothing linked her to this spot, but a lineage to Oates' wild flight and mates who looked and looked for the memory of a noise heard by no one. The flare of her voice was all shot and speechless. She could not even condemn her own body for its sin. Soon the glory of her painted self was rubbed off and no wet strokes were added to the dry fresco of her throat. She blended into the riverbank's collage of she-oak needles and terraced rock, a green eco-sculpture interrupted by the blood's rude shock. When the first wings brushed her, she gave an invisible shout. No grim dwarves found her encased in a solid crystal, her momentum frozen by the youth's anti-aging spell. Only cicadas tried to teach her their ingenious trick of tunnelling into the body's rich vein and breaking through the skin's tiny supernova. But the tyranny of distance between the species was too great, their staccato language indecipherable as the rhythms of the busy hive faded under dusk's brittle authority. In awe, they left their golden filigree husks behind, pinned to her legs, tools down as if they'd returned to finish the job of letting her out later, the downtime of immortality, a luxury reserved for the quick-lived. As insects clocked on for night's 12-hour shift, she listened to the sad echo of their factory floor. Moth-stuck, the moonlight tranced her into leaving and she clambered free of this earthbound shell. Her soul's buried toes dug into the cracked edges of her ribcage as she struggled out. Vertebrae stirred like a used ladder. The muted wood of her footfalls bounced across the river's heartland as she leapt over her back's sulphur bulk. The tearing of herself was a silence's muffled shot. Unfurled, her damp wings dried in the sun's dying rays. Dust soft, they lifted her at last like a father pulling his fallen child up off a bindi patch on the front lawn. Her pain was gone, plucked from her skin by impulsive grace. She let down the antennae of her hair and signalled her change to a receding world. Aerial now, she gained height as the current of transformation surged through.
A day out. The sun shining through the blinds, the moon crawling down the sky. Your last glimpse of the stars above until you welcome a morning hug. Brushing your hair and cleaning your teeth, saying goodbye when you leave. Breathing in the cool, refreshing air on your way to the city square. Catching a bus for the day to begin. Looking out the window to the people looking in. A beautiful sight the gardens behold, a beautiful scent where the flowers grow. Here at last on a glorious day, you can't help but smile as you watch children play. Queen's Park, the movies, Ipswich City Square. One city, one family, a place that cares. And when, sadly, the day is done, you reluctantly trudge back the way you've come, one last look at the city you love, as the stars twinkle in the sky above. Well done.
This is called Crises, What Crises? Did Supertramp have a crystal ball? Did they have some insight into the amount of rain to fall? Questions, more questions, and even fewer answers to all. The Ipswich flood of 2011 would surge like a brawl. Tuesday, January 11, the disaster would strike. No warnings of the calamity or dangers alike. The rain had been steady, but no cause to highlight. The little boy with his fingers seemed safe in the dike. As time wore on, the predicament became grim. The water continued to rise, and relief prospects seemed dim. Volunteers stepped up, like heroes without a whim, to help ease the plight, let some sunshine in. So now we reflect on the catastrophe that was. We are thankful for the aid and relief given by Oz. The Ipswich community, so grateful, give pause to thank all those wonderful people who rallied to our cause. Good on you.